Let's get some help down in Santa Clara because Jake Hutchinson, Audacy senior writer, covers the 49ers as well as the Warriors for Audacy here with us in 95.7. The Game is on the line. Jake, appreciate you hopping on. I know there was a lot going down there today, so thanks for your time.
Hey, no worries. Yeah, we all just talked to Jed York, one of his rare media appearances. So that was interesting.
Well, I'm sure it didn't sound quite like the sound we were playing yesterday from 2017 about how you don't dismiss owners, because that was following a 2-14 season. This, of course, is a trip to the Super Bowl with a chance to hoist the 6th in franchise history. But what were your takeaways from hearing a very rare appearance from the owner of the San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah, I'd say by far the most interesting thing is he went back to the training camp when they brought Brock Purdy in. And, they had Jimmy Garoppolo, who they ended up paying something like $20 million, depending on his incentives. They had Trey Lance, who they invested in. And there was a moment, Jed said that Shanahan was like, hey, Jed, I need to talk to you. And Jed got pulled to the side by Kyle. And he's like, it's never good when Kyle's like, I got to talk to you about something. So Kyle pulls him to the side and tells him, hey, Jed, I think our third-string quarterback might be the best quarterback on our roster. And basically that was the point of Jed saying that Shanahan's always been honest with him, and that's part of the reason that he invested in the roster from the beginning. Because when he interviewed him, he said a lot of guys are blowing smoke up his, and Shanahan came in and he's like, this is one of the worst rosters I've ever seen. And so it was the point of saying that Shanahan's always been straight up with Jed. And that story was pretty intriguing to me.
Wow, can't wait to hear more about it, Jake. That's awesome. Let me ask you this from a personal standpoint, and I've told Evan and the listeners this. From a defensive standpoint, I have not got over the Green Bay game and the lack of pressure in the first half from Detroit. Has that affected you to where you look at this game? You come next Sunday against Kansas City. Are you nervous? Is there any trepidation? Or do you look at it like, you know what? They started out slow. They won both games. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, what I will say is I think their coverage on the back end has to be way better. What's promising for the 49ers in this matchup is that the Chiefs tackles are the worst part of their offensive line by far. They're built totally differently, where their interior offensive line is elite. They've got Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and just an elite interior. So I worry more about, Isaiah Pacheco running up the middle against them. But I think, Bosa mentioned, and I think he sort of put it out there to get the ref's attention, that their tackles hold. So if their tackles get away with holding, it could be rough. But I think Bosa and Young are going to be able to rush those guys effectively on the edge.
Live with us on the Boxer and Gerson guest line from Santa Clara, just after Jed York spoke to the media, is Jake Hutchinson with us here from Audacy at 95.7 The Game. And Jake, one thing we've been trying to figure out today is just why Vegas seems to have some slight favor towards San Francisco. I would contend it's because of the totality of the year as opposed to the last 2 or 3 games, depending on which team you're looking at in the postseason. But why do you think that the San Francisco 49ers are right now 2-point favorites over the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, I would agree. The 49ers, I mean, for anyone who follows advanced analytics, and, I keep tabs on that stuff, but I don't think it's tried and true in terms of deciding everything. But the 49ers were the best team in the league by pretty much every advanced analytics stat. Brock Purdy was the most efficient quarterback in the league. They have an abundance of offensive weapons. And while their defense has struggled, their defense performed pretty well over the course of the year. And they're just stacked at every single position, and they've been there before. So I think it is basically, it's like, do you want to, from Vegas's perspective, if you look at both teams, I think the 49ers are the better team. But again, it's like, it's Mahomes. So are they really the better team if the other quarterback is this, absolute freak, possibly the greatest quarterback we've ever seen? I don't know. But from Vegas's perspective, I'm with you. I think it's the totality of the season. Both of their units have performed great over the course of the year, whereas the Chiefs sort of came on hot towards the end.
Jake, I've given Kyle his flowers, and I've done so, and also criticized him in situational play calling like the 19 Super Bowl, but I know he's brilliant, and I can't ignore this. Just feels like the last box he needs to check to be up there with the great coaches, right?
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. And it's something where, you got Andy Reid. It took him forever to get the monkey off his back until he got Mahomes. And I think Shanahan probably believes, like, hey, I've got Purdy. This is my shot, right? And I'm not comparing Purdy to Mahomes. He's never going to be that. But, like, for what Purdy does in Shanahan's offense, in running it, and being able to add the stuff that's always been missing with Jimmy, where Jimmy was a guy that would hit on the short slants, that would get a lot of yards after catch, but he couldn't target the deep third of the field. He couldn't make off-schedule plays and play make. Purdy does that while executing everything that Jimmy does and better. And so I think Kyle's thinking, yeah, I've got as good a shot as ever. You know, we came really close last time against Mahomes. The defense is better, but the offense is worse. So, yeah, in my view, I think Kyle's feeling pretty good, but yeah, it's about. I'm with you. You got to get the monkey off his back.
On the Boxer and Gerson guest line is Jake Hutchinson. And Jake, we were sitting next to each other at the NFC Championship game, and I also know you kind of threw this in a chance after the game to have as close to a one-on-one as you can get with Brock Purdy. And I know you asked him a couple of questions. What about this guy? Because you mentioned the difference between 2019 and this year. I think it is primarily at the quarterback position. But what about this guy stands out to you in terms of Brock Purdy, with just how he's able to handle the moment and kind of take us behind the scenes of what you've seen from him this year?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, you know, with any other young quarterback, and listen, it all goes back to the fact that he's the last pick of the draft, right? He would be talked about in a completely different way if he was in Lance's slot, where people would be like, wow, this guy is, of course he's executing. He's the most incredible leader. You know, he did incredible things in college. But I think it goes back to the fact that he had to carry an Iowa State team, which is like, you know, he had one good wide receiver. You know, I think it was Xavier Hutchinson, but like he did not have elite weapons. He had to carry that unit. He played 4 years, one on the road in Norman, Oklahoma, like playing these big games. And for him to come in and go from where he has to carry everything to just having to get the ball off to the most elite weapons in the league and having an elite head coach, he was probably like, this is actually pretty easy for me, you know? And I think people miss that a little bit, but I also think his leadership is crazy. He's 24. He's in basically not even his full second year in the league, and he just comes with a poise and intelligence and studies in a way that like is top tier level. And he has the trust of Shanahan in a way that Shanahan has never trusted a quarterback he's had with the 49ers. You know, they'll talk about stuff at halftime, inject a play that, you know, they didn't even have in the game plan just by talking about it. And that's something that this team has lacked forever. And that's something where, you know, against Green Bay, he probably threw the ball too much with Purdy instead of running the ball. Like, I know they had a lot of big boxes, but like he trusted Purdy in bad conditions to get it done. And like, there's no shot that he would have done the same thing with Garoppolo.
Jake, we'll get you out of here on this one. Evan and I were talking about Cam Newton's comments. Also, Amy Trask, who kind of, you know, I could spot a hater, Jake, from a mile away. But Evan asked me, you know, when did we start breaking down how much one player meant, like a bus driver, he's a product of the system? My answer was social media, but if I were to throw that, you know, to you, when did that shift change? Because hating on Brock, it's kind of out of control, but how would you answer it? Because to me, there has been a shift in that stuff.
No, I'm completely with you. It's hard to put like an exact date on it, but it feels like, you know, Twitter, you know, starting going back to like when Twitter guys got really involved in the draft, right? And people are getting their takes off, going back to the Mahomes draft. And it's like, well, if you were right about Mahomes, you're going to brag about that. And if you were wrong about this guy, you're not going to admit it. So I think it goes back to that. And I think a lot of people are just stubborn about being like, well, this guy like doesn't have all the measurables, but he actually has the pocket presence. He has an elite, you know, 10-yard split to move around and run, as you saw in that championship game. And it comes down to the fact that like people don't want to admit that Purdy's not Garoppolo, even though it's abundantly clear that he's miles beyond what Jimmy did. So I'm with you. There's definitely been a shift in how we talk, and I think it's silly. Like if you watch tape, if you actually watch what, you know, Purdy has done the last 2 years, like you don't have any doubts about this guy in terms of being able to execute the offense. You know, he makes some head-scratching decisions sometimes. He gets a little carried away, but he is far and away, you know, the best fit this offense has ever had here.
Well, Jake, I know you're heading out to Vegas, so I'm sure we'll chat down the line, but thanks for taking your time.
Thank you.
And thanks for peeling back the curtain for us here this afternoon.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.